My shift at the behavioral hospital began unusually calm, a rarity in this line of work. But as any psych floor worker knows, the calm is often just the storm's deceptive prelude. Late in the afternoon, things took a turn. A new patient arrived from the ER, escorted by paramedics and a police officer. He was a soldier, still dressed in his active duty uniform, though it looked like it had been through hell. His combat boots were scuffed, the laces frayed. His uniform was drenched in sweat, clinging to his body, and the stench, like stale body odor and fear, hit us before we even got close. His hair was matted and disheveled, a clear sign he hadn't showered in days. The police explained they'd found him wandering the streets of the base, muttering frantically about the devil. His voice, they said, had been urgent and disconnected, as if he were trapped in some unseen battle. The ER staff had tried to stabilize him, but his paranoia had only escalated. When we escorted him to his room, he barely said a word. His eyes darted around the hallway, scanning every corner, every shadow, like he was expecting an ambush. His movements were sharp and deliberate, but his mouth never stopped moving. He whispered constantly, muttering about demons, shadows, and the devil. For a while, we thought he might settle down. He sat quietly on the edge of his bed, staring at the floor, his hands clenched into fists. But then came the sound, a sudden, deafening slam of his door shutting. The noise echoed down the hallway, sharp enough to make every staff member freeze. And then, just as abruptly, the light in his room went out. A tech and I exchanged uneasy glances before heading to his room to investigate. As we approached, I could feel the tension in the air. We pushed the door open, and the flickering fluorescent light inside cast long, jagged shadows across the walls. The patient stood in the far corner of the room, his back to us, his head tilted slightly downward. The stillness of his body was unnerving. He didn't flinch, didn't acknowledge us. He just stood there like a figure frozen in time. It was like something straight out of the Blair Witch Project. A shiver ran down my spine as I called out to him, keeping my voice steady. "Hey, we need to keep the door open and the lights on, okay?" No response. The tech, braver than me, stepped forward and gently tapped his arm, calling his name. That's when everything spiraled out of control. The patient spun around so fast it was a blur. His eyes were wide and wild, filled with a mix of terror and rage. His expression morphed. Terror, anger, something almost animalistic, and then he screamed. But it wasn't a normal scream. It was a high-pitched, blood-curdling shriek that echoed through the entire wing. It was the kind of sound that froze every person in their tracks. For a moment, the silence that followed was almost louder than the scream itself. I tried to de-escalate, calling his name again, but before I could get another word out, he leaped onto the bed. His movements were quick, feral. With one swift motion, he flipped the mattress toward us like it weighed nothing. The mattress slammed into us, knocking the tech and me backward into the wardrobe. By the time we regained our balance, the patient was gone. We caught a glimpse of him darting down the hallway, his bare feet slapping against the tile floor as he moved with unnerving speed. We bolted after him, adrenaline pumping. When we caught up, he was standing in the common room, holding one of the heavy lounge chairs above his head. These chairs were designed to be difficult to move, let alone lift, but there he was, his chest heaving, glaring at us with an intensity that made my stomach churn. "We're here to help you," I said, keeping my voice calm, though my heart was racing. He didn't respond. Instead, he hurled the chair toward us with incredible force. It slammed into the wall, denting it. Before we could react, he took off again, this time heading for the nurse's station. We chased him down the hallway, shouting for him to stop, but he didn't even look back. Finally, he reached the nurse's station and, to my horror, managed to open the door. We'd been complaining to maintenance for weeks about the broken magnet lock on that door, but clearly, fixing it hadn't been a priority. He slipped inside and shut the door behind him. The air was thick with tension as we carefully opened the door, ready for anything. But when we stepped inside, The nurse's station was empty. He was gone. We searched everywhere, every corner, every crevice of the unit, but it was like he had vanished into thin air. The rest of the night passed in eerie silence. Every shadow seemed darker, every sound louder. We double-checked every door, searched the entire building, and reviewed the security footage, but there was no trace of him. The hospital went into lockdown as we called in the police for assistance. After 10 hours of searching, they finally called it off, concluding that he must have slipped past the cameras and stolen a badge to get out. But to this day, no one knows for sure what happened. And strangely, the light in his room, the one that flickered when we first entered, still flickers from time to time, as if his presence somehow lingers.